This is our full self-installation kit, and this is going to be our installation video. We'll go over it real quick. Our cell, our reservoir, our amp meter, the two 10-foot rolls of 10-gauge wire, 8-foot of fuel hose, all your electrical connections, hose clamps, your drain tubes, your black 10-gauge wire, your fuse holder with your fuses, your two T-barbs, your flashback arresters, everything you need for a complete self-install on the HHO kit. For the sake of time, I've went ahead and mounted the three-way reservoir, and I just used a couple self-mounting screws, and I went ahead and put our hose on our cell, and I've already measured and cut one side of the hose, and the other I have still on the 8-foot roll. I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to have 4 hose clamps. You put your hose clamps on your water connections between your cell and reservoir, and one of them, like I said, has already been measured. I'm just going to drop it down here where I'm going to mount it. See, my first hose has been measured. I'm just going to measure how my second hose is going to be laid out. I pull it back out and I cut it. I've also put my 2 hose clamps on. Slide my cell back down in to where we're going. Slide my hoses on, and I mount it down. Tighten up your hose clamps, and you're ready to put water in your reservoir for your cell. Our next step is to feed this into the engine, and what we're going to do is through this vehicle, we're going to put it through the PCV valve. Normally on a 4-way reservoir or a gas vehicle, you're going to put it through the PCV valve and the air intake. We'll go over that in just a minute, but basically this is the majority of it. You're going to see that I've just put the remaining part of my fuel hose, I've snapped it on here, slid it onto my 3-way nozzle, and ran it over here. And I'm also going to show you our PCV hookup, how we do that. This is our PCV line right here. You'll recognize it by coming off of your valve cover. That's your PCV, and this is your PCV line. It recirculates right under your carburetor here. And what I've done is I've clipped it, and I'm simply going to install a T on my hose, and I'm going to connect my hose that I've ran over here from my reservoir onto my T. And now simply my HHO is going to be vacuumed into my PCV valve. I don't use hose clamps on these connections. We're using a vacuum, so it's just going to tighten the connections. You don't need hose clamps except for your water connections. And the only other thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to clip in my line and place another T in line. And that's simply going to be for my drain tube. The next step is putting our flashback arrestor in line here. You just simply want to clip your tube. You do want to make sure you're between your reservoir and your T where you put your drain tube. And you want your flow to go, of course, towards your engine, not towards your reservoir. And this is just going to, if he was to have a backfire or anything, this would catch it instead of going to your reservoir. And that's taken care of. And the next is our electrical connections. You've got your 2 spools of 10-gauge wire and your black wire. And this vehicle's already had a cell on it, and I'm going to show you how I did that. You actually, right here's my black wire. I just found me a nut and grounded it over here, and then I got my wire connected to it with one of my electrical connections, as you can see here. Okay, and this is my red wire. I've got it ready. for connection. Another electrical connection on it. Put those on the cell, a couple washers. And if you did happen to have to run a 4-way, I did want to show you, this is your 90 degree. You're simply going to drill a hole into your air filter and install this there and put your other hose there along with your drain tube and check valve. So that's the only difference there. Like I said, this has already been done. I simply drilled a hole through my firewall. But I'm going to go inside the truck here and show you how I did that. This is the amp meter installed. And this is where we came in at. You can see we came in right over there, just drilled a hole and inserted my line, and I put my fuse holder on there. So you find your hot wire that cuts on and off with your ignition, and you go through your fuse, and then you go in your amp meter and out your amp meter. That's all you do. You don't hook your amp meter to a ground. You just simply clip your hot wire and put it on both sides of your amp meter. So we're ready to hook up here. I'm going to come around here and actually put in some electrolyte into the reservoir. And what you want to do is when you put electrolyte into the reservoir, you want to get your injector, put it down into the nozzle. You can do this with a funnel, a thin funnel, but you want to go down into the nozzle that's going into the cell. You don't want to go into the other one that's returning. You want to go to the lower one that hooks to the middle of the reservoir. And I just simply inject my electrolyte in there. And what we're doing here is we're filling up one side with water and allowing the air that's actually in the cell right now to come out the other hose. So that's the idea around this one. It's going to take us a couple fills here to get this full. But our cell is now full of water. We'll put one more in there just to make sure. Now that we've got liquid in our reservoir, I simply add the rest. Our mix here, and I'm going to cut the vehicle on. When I cut the vehicle on, everything's hooked up and ready to start. Let me start her up. The very last thing I do is, as it's running here, I actually take my cell before it's mounted and I just wiggle it back and forth to allow any air that may have collected in there to escape. And then I mount my cell, and that's the completion of the full self-install kit.